It was raining, the kind of slow, persistent drizzle that made everything feel heavier. Ethan Whitmore sat alone on a worn park bench, clothes damp, hands shaking slightly as he held a folded letter. Across the street, Claire turned back one last time, her eyes full of something between heartbreak and disbelief. She didn't come back. He didn't call out, and the letter stayed unopened in his hands. He grew up surrounded by chandeliers, private jets, and people who smiled with their mouths, but never with their eyes. Ethan Whitmore was the heir to one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast, and the loneliest man at every party he attended. Every relationship he ever had was shadowed by doubt. Did they love him or his last name? After one more hollow breakup and a media scandal that painted him as heartless, Ethan vanished. No goodbye, no press release, just disappeared. He left behind the world of luxury and reappeared as a dishwasher in a quiet town no one had ever heard of. He wanted something money couldn't buy, something real. And then he met Claire. This is the story of how he tried to find love by hiding who he really was, and ended up discovering something far more painful than rejection. But back then, he had no idea what was coming. Ethan never liked mirrors. Not because he was ashamed of his face, but because he hated what it reminded him of. A man shaped by privilege, burdened by distrust. He'd spent his 20s in suits tailored to perfection, shaking hands with people who knew his net worth before they knew his voice. But in the small town of Millbridge, no one knew the name Whitmore. There, he was just Ethan Walker, a quiet guy who moved into a modest room above the old inn and asked for work in the kitchen. He scrubbed dishes, mopped floors, kept his head down, and for the first time in years, people spoke to him without needing anything. At first, it was freeing. Then, it became terrifying. Because real conversations started happening. People shared stories, pain, dreams, and one of them, Claire Bennett, made him forget who he was pretending to be. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to impress. She laughed with her whole body and looked people in the eye like she was searching for something honest in them. She took care of her sick mother, worked double shifts at the front desk, and still found time to read psychology books during her breaks. Ethan found himself lingering longer in the kitchen just to hear her voice float in from the lobby. One night, she offered him tea after a long shift. They talked for hours about movies, regrets, childhood fears. It was effortless, natural, terrifyingly real. But each moment that brought them closer also tightened the knot in his stomach. She trusted him, this version of him, the quiet, poor, hard-working man with calloused hands and no past. And he had lied about everything. One evening, as they sat outside under the old oak tree near the inn, Claire looked at him and said, "I can forgive a lot of things, Ethan. But lies? I've had enough of those for a lifetime." That night, he couldn't sleep. His fingers hovered over his phone, over his name online, over the truth, but he closed the screen. He still believed he could keep both, the lie and the love. That's when everything started to unravel. Ethan hadn't smiled, really smiled, in years. But with Claire it was different. Their mornings became rituals. He'd pass by the front desk, she'd hand him a coffee she swore wasn't free, and they'd exchange small glances that said more than words ever could. By the second month, they were inseparable. He helped her fix the leaky sink in her apartment. She brought homemade soup when he caught a cold. They walked together after work, talked about books, joked about dreams they'd never admit to anyone else. For the first time, Ethan felt seen, not for his last name, not for his assets, but for his silences, his kindness, the way he listened. And Claire, she was opening up too. One night, under the glow of the town's one flickering street lamp, she told him about her ex. He had lied for years, pretended to be someone he wasn't, someone stable, safe. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just the betrayal that broke her. It was the fact that she never saw it coming. "I don't care if someone's broke," she whispered. "I care if they think I'm too stupid to see through them." Ethan's heart dropped. He wanted to tell her right there, confess everything, but fear crept in. What if she leaves? What if I lose the only real thing I've ever had? So he said nothing. Instead, he buried the guilt deeper each day. He created a fake backstory, told her he'd worked in construction, that he was trying to start over after a bankruptcy. It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Claire believed him, and that made everything worse, because now the lie had weight, it had eyes, it had hands that held hers. Then came the breaking point. A man walked into the inn, tall, confident, wearing a navy coat Ethan recognized immediately. Derek Caldwell, an old friend from boarding school, and Ethan's secret just walked through the front door. "Ethan?" Derek's voice echoed. "Damn, man, what are you doing here?" Claire stood behind the counter, frozen, Ethan's face drained of color. He tried to smile, play it off, steer Derek away. Too late. Derek laughed. "Still slumming it, huh? I told the guys you were serious about that real-life experiment." Claire didn't say a word. She just looked at Ethan like she was watching someone she loved disappear right in front of her. And she walked away. He tried to go after her, to explain, to fix it. But he still thought maybe he could control the damage. Maybe he could still hold on. Ethan waited outside Claire's apartment for hours that night. The porch light flickered overhead, casting long, broken shadows across the steps. He held a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked himself, the kind she once said reminded her of her childhood summers. But the door never opened. Not once. The next morning, she wasn't at the front desk. By noon, Marilyn, Claire's mother, called the inn, asking for time off on her daughter's behalf. She didn't explain why, and the silence on the other end of the line was enough to crush him. He left notes. He texted. He even walked to her apartment and knocked. Nothing. By the third day, he returned the flowers to the same field. They had already started to wilt. The town, once warm and welcoming, now felt colder. People who used to greet him with casual smiles now looked past him. Word traveled fast in small places, especially when it hurt someone people cared about. But it was more than social rejection. It was the mirror finally showing Ethan what he had become. He walked back to the room above the inn and stared at himself. No suit, no expensive watch, just a man, afraid to tell the truth because he was terrified no one would love who he really was. The next week, he received a letter from Marilyn. Handwritten, short. "I know you hurt her, but I also know people don't hurt others unless they're hurting too. Just don't come back around unless it's real this time. M." He read it over and over again, then folded it carefully and placed it in his drawer, beside the photo he had secretly taken of Claire and Marilyn at the town fair. They were laughing in it, radiant, alive. He hadn't seen her since. That night, he packed his things. By sunrise, Ethan had left Millbridge behind, driving without direction until the landscape changed back to high rises and noise. Back to the city, back to penthouse silence, back to himself, or whatever version of himself still remained. He didn't speak to anyone for days, not his assistant, not his lawyers, not even Derek, who had tried texting after realizing what he'd done. Ethan ignored it all. He spent nights walking through the city aimlessly, blending into the crowd, unrecognized but utterly alone. He had all the freedom money could buy, and no one to share a word with. Then came the moment he couldn't forget. A week later, he received an envelope with no return address. Inside, just a photo. It was Claire, sitting beside her mother, holding a cup of tea. She wasn't smiling. She looked distant, but she looked strong. On the back, just 2 words, written in delicate handwriting. "We're healing." He didn't know what it meant. A goodbye, a sign of life, a message. Either way, she was healing. And he sat alone at his grand piano, untouched for months, and let his fingers fall softly on the keys. It made no sound. He hadn't plugged it in. And you? Have you ever let fear silence the truth and watch something real slip through your fingers? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage to be honest before it's too late. It was the smallest thing that broke through, a paper cut, Ethan had been sorting through old mail, letters from board members, charity invitations, quarterly reports. None of it mattered anymore. But when the envelope sliced his finger, he watched a single drop of blood form, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something. It startled him. The pain was sharp, quick, honest. He walked to the mirror, looked at himself, really looked. His face was thinner, tired. His eyes, once shielded by polished charm, now just raw. There was no one left to impress, no role to play. He pulled out the drawer where he kept the letter from Marilyn, read it again. Then he reached for something else. The leather-bound notebook he had taken to Millbridge. He'd started writing in it the first night he arrived. Pages filled with observations, fears, memories, and Claire. He flipped through the entries until he found one that stopped him. She asked questions like she's not afraid of the answers. He smiled, just barely, then turned to a blank page and wrote her a letter. Not to win her back, not to fix anything, but to thank her. For showing him what it means to be real, for seeing him before he could even see himself. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, and walked 3 blocks to the nearest mailbox. No name, no return address, just her. Then he returned home, and for the first time since he'd left Millbridge, he opened the windows. Let the city air in, let the silence break. He wasn't fixed. Not yet, not even close. But something inside him had shifted. He didn't know if it would matter, if she'd read it, if she'd care, but he knew one thing, for the first time, he wanted to try. Ethan didn't go back to work right away. Instead, he started waking up early. Not because he had meetings, but because he wanted to feel the day again. He walked the city on foot, bought coffee from street vendors, sat in parks, and listened to strangers talk. For a man who once lived behind gates and tinted windows, the world suddenly felt wide open. But the turning point came one afternoon in a subway station. He saw a boy, maybe 13, trying to sell sketches on torn notebook paper. People passed without looking. Ethan watched for 10 minutes, then sat beside him. "Are you good?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "Not good enough." Ethan looked at the drawings. They were rough, but full of heart. Movement, story. He took out his wallet, paused, and put it back. Instead, he said, "How about this? You teach me to draw and I'll bring snacks." The boy laughed. "Deal!" That moment sparked something new. Ethan reached out to a few contacts quietly. He funded an after-school art space in a neighborhood few of his peers had ever set foot in, but he did it anonymously. No press, no credit, just art supplies, mentors, and space to breathe. It wasn't about redemption, it was about connection. Each week he came back, sat with the kids, listened to their stories, learned to sketch messy shapes and feel okay about failing. They didn't care who he was, they just called him E. And slowly, without realizing, Ethan began to feel like someone else. Or maybe someone more himself than ever. But even in the middle of that quiet healing, her name never left his mind. Claire. Every night he'd walk past the letterbox and wonder, did she read it? Did it matter? And every night he'd return home, heart heavier and lighter all at once. Some nights were quiet, others weren't. Ethan would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, asking questions no one could answer. Had he really changed? Or was he just trying to rewrite the ending? He kept thinking about what Claire had said. "I can forgive a lot of things, but not lies." Was that who he still was? A liar with a better conscience. The art center became his refuge. The kids saw him as steady, encouraging. They didn't know the version of him that ran away from truth, but Ethan did. And he couldn't pretend anymore, not even to himself. One afternoon, Lena Myers, one of the old Inn employees, sent him a message through the contact form on the foundation's site. No details, just, "Claire's mom passed last week. She's still here. Thought you should know." He stared at the message for hours. So much had changed, and yet the thought of seeing Claire again shook him to the core. What if she hates me? What if I only make things worse? But then came the other voice, quieter but clearer. And what if she doesn't? He didn't book a flight right away. He walked through the city for hours, weighing the risks. He wasn't afraid of being rejected, not anymore. He was afraid of being forgiven, because forgiveness meant facing everything. Finally, one night, he took out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. It rang once, then again, voicemail. He didn't leave a message. The next morning he packed a bag, locked the apartment and stood by the window for a long minute. Then he whispered, not to anyone in particular, "I'm not going back to fix the past. I just want to show her who I really am, for real this time." He turned to leave, and then the phone rang. The drive to Millbridge felt longer this time. Maybe because Ethan knew exactly what he was walking into. Not just a town, but a reckoning. He didn't bring gifts. No flowers, no money, no speeches, just himself. He parked on the far end of the main street, recognizing the small bookstore, the cafe that still had the same faded, homemade pie sign. The inn hadn't changed either, except for the silence. He stepped inside, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Lena was behind the counter. She looked up, didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. "She's at the oak tree," she said simply. He nodded, too full of nerves to speak. The walk there felt like a dream, one of those slow, heavy dreams where you know something important is waiting at the end. And there she was. Claire stood under the tree where they once sat and talked for hours. Same place, same quiet wind. But everything had changed. She turned slowly when she heard his footsteps. No tears, no anger, just tired eyes. And something unreadable. Ethan didn't move closer. He stood a few feet away, hands at his sides. "I heard about your mom," he said softly. "I'm sorry, Claire. I should have said it sooner. I should have said a lot of things sooner." She didn't speak. He nodded to himself, then looked down. "When I came here, I thought hiding who I was would protect me from being used. I never meant to hurt you. I was just scared of being seen, of not being enough." Her voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "You weren't honest with me, not even when I asked for the truth." "I know," he said, "and I don't expect anything now. I just wanted you to see me as I am." He took a folded piece of paper from his jacket and placed it on the bench beside her. "It's not a letter to win you back, just a thank you for waking me up." Then he turned and walked away. It started to rain. The same soft drizzle from that day in the city, except this time he didn't sit. He didn't wait. He kept walking, not because he didn't care, but because he finally did. Then, behind him, footsteps. "Ethan!" she called out. He stopped. When he turned, Claire stood there in the rain, holding the letter unread. She stepped closer. "You were right," she said. "You didn't come to fix it. You came to show me who you are." She looked at him for a long second, then reached out and took his hand. No kiss, no grand gesture, just two people standing in the rain, no lies between them. They didn't rush anything after that day. Claire didn't ask for promises, and Ethan didn't offer guarantees. They met for coffee, talked more, sat quietly when there were no words. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks, just small moments of peace where pain used to live. Ethan never returned to the life he had before. Not really. Yes, the business still ran. The board still sent emails. But the version of him who chased meaning through money was gone. Instead, he poured his time into the art center, expanded it, created scholarships. And once a week, he visited the park with a sketchbook, not to draw anything perfect, but just to feel connected. One afternoon, Claire joined him. She brought 2 coffees, sat beside him and said, "You're getting better at circles." He smiled. "Still can't draw hands." "You'll get there," she said. Ethan looked at her, at the light in her eyes, and understood something simple but life-changing. Being loved for who you are is rare. But letting yourself be who you are, that's the part that takes real courage, because at the end of the day, truth is the only thing that stays when everything else fades. And sometimes the most honest version of yourself is the only one worth offering. Maybe you've hidden parts of yourself too, out of fear, out of shame, or just to protect something fragile. Maybe Like Ethan, you thought that if people knew the real you, they'd walk away. But sometimes the right people only find us when we finally stop pretending. So tell me, have you ever risked being honest, even when it hurt? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to read your words today. And if this story touched something in you, leave a like. It helps this message reach more people who are still searching for something real. And if you believe that love built on truth is still possible, even in a world full of masks, subscribe to the channel. Because we still have so many stories to tell,